My name is Linnea Ward, and the day my father found me walking nearly 5 miles along Route 9 with my 2-year-old son, everyone thought I was the one making reckless choices. They didn't know my husband had secretly taken my car, emptied my savings, destroyed my credit, answered job offers in my name, and was already building a custody case to prove I was an unfit mother before I ever tried to leave. By the time I discovered the truth, he wasn't just trying to control my life anymore. He was trying to rewrite it. And if my father hadn't stopped that truck beside me that afternoon, I might have lost my son forever. Chapter 1. The Keys. He said I was too unstable to hold. By the time my father found me on Route 9, I had been walking for nearly 5 miles with my son strapped against my chest. The June heat pressed down on the pavement, and every passing truck pushed hot air and grit against us. Owen was 2 years and 10 months old, too heavy for the carrier I had stopped using months earlier, but I had been afraid to let him walk beside the traffic. His cheek rested against my collarbone, damp with sweat. Every few minutes he asked for water, and every time I tipped the bottle toward him, I watched the level drop and wondered how much farther I could go. I heard tires grind against gravel behind me. My body tightened before I looked back. Then I saw my father climbing out of his truck. Martin Hale was 61 and had worked in law enforcement for more than 3 decades. To most people, he was Sheriff Hale, a calm man who knew exactly what to do when something went wrong. In that moment, he was only my father, staring at my blistered feet and the child strapped to my body, as if he had found us standing at the edge of a cliff. "Linnea, what are you doing out here?" I tried to answer, but Owen started crying again. My father opened the rear door of his truck and pulled out the child's safety seat he kept for the afternoons when he picked Owen up. He secured my son first, checked the straps twice, then handed me another bottle of water. "Where is your Honda?" "It is being repaired," I said. The answer came automatically. I had repeated it so many times that it no longer felt like a lie. My father looked at me for several seconds. "How long has it been at the garage?" I could not remember which version Evan was using that week. First, the tire had damaged the alignment. Then the axle needed replacement. Then the part had been delayed. "A few months," I said. "Why did you not call me?" I looked down at the phone in my hand. The battery was almost dead. The location icon was still glowing at the top of the screen. "Because Evan checks it?" My father did not interrupt. I told him the rest in pieces. Evan kept the keys. My debit card had stopped working. I did not know what was in our accounts. Evan said I was too unstable to drive, and Diane agreed with him. My father asked who Diane was keeping my documents for, even though he already knew she was my mother-in-law. "For safekeeping," I said. "That is what she calls it." Then I told him the part I had not said aloud to anyone. Evan said if I ever took Owen and left, he would prove to a judge that I was not stable enough to be his mother. My father's hands tightened around the steering wheel. What proof does he think he has? I do not know. That was not entirely true. I knew about the nights I cried because Owen would not sleep. I knew Diane wrote things down when I forgot appointments. I knew Evan saved messages where I said I felt overwhelmed. I just did not know how far it had gone. That morning I'd asked Evan for the keys so I could take Owen to the summer reading program at Hudson Ridge Public Library. I had worked there for years before Owen was born. I thought walking through those doors might remind me that I had once been someone people trusted with schedules, money, children, and decisions. Evan stood in the kitchen holding the keys. "You did not take your medication this morning," he said. "I do not take medication." His face barely changed. "That is exactly why this worries me." Diane arrived less than 10 minutes later, using the key Evan had given her for emergencies. She walked into the kitchen without knocking and looked at me with the careful concern she used whenever she wanted other people to think I was the problem. "Linnea, if you cannot remember the medication, maybe you should not be driving with Owen." "There is no medication," I said. Evan slipped the keys into his pocket. "You can go out when I know you are calm enough." I wanted to shout. Instead, I lowered my voice. because Owen was watching from his high chair. I am calm. Diane glanced at Evan as if my answer proved the opposite. Later, while Evan was in his office, I heard him speaking to Diane on the phone. "We need to document this episode," he said. "If she does something reckless, I want the record to be clear." I stood in the hallway with one hand against the wall. Episode. Record. Those words did something the insults never had. They made me understand that Evan was not only controlling the present, he was preparing a version of the future in which everything I did could be used against me. I waited until he went into the bathroom. Then I filled Owen's bottle-packed diapers, put him in the carrier, and walked out the front door. Sitting in my father's truck, I told him all of it. He asked who held my bank cards, who checked my phone, who kept Owen's birth certificate and passport, whether I could see friends without permission, whether Evan had ever threatened me directly. Each answer sounded worse outside the house. Diane kept most of the documents so I would not lose them. Evan checked my search history. I had stopped hearing from friends. I had once seen a Honda that looked exactly like mine near Hudson, but Evan told me I was confused. My father listened without turning the conversation into an interrogation. Then he said something I had needed to hear for years. "You are not losing your mind. You have been forced to doubt yourself for too long." He also made one thing clear. Because I was his daughter, he would not investigate Evan himself. He would not use his badge to threaten anyone. He could get us somewhere safe, request an independent civil standby, and help me reach an attorney and an advocate. I told him Owen's birth certificate, passport, insurance card, and medication were still at the house. "We can go somewhere safe first," he said. I shook my head. "If I leave those documents there, Diane will move them." My father waited. "I will go back for the papers," I said, "but I am not staying." 2 deputies from the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office met us outside the house in Rhinebeck. Evan and Diane were already standing on the porch. Evan looked composed. He always did when someone else was watching. "My wife is experiencing a prolonged postpartum crisis," he told the deputies. "I have been trying to help her." Diane gestured toward Owen. She walked several miles along a highway with a toddler. That is not safe behavior. For one terrible second, I almost apologized. My father stood beside me, but did not speak for me. "Tell them what happened," he said. I asked for my clothes, Owen's things, our identification, the insurance card, my phone charger, and the medication Owen sometimes needed for his breathing. Evan stepped in front of the door. "You can leave, but Owen stays here." One deputy explained that they were not there to decide custody. There was no custody order, and the purpose of the civil standby was to prevent a confrontation while I collected essential belongings. I held Owen tighter and walked inside. Diane opened the safe with a stiff expression. She handed over the documents one at a time, as though each belonged to her. "You will be back within a week," she said. "You do not have a job, a car, or enough credit to rent a place." Outside, Evan leaned close enough that the deputies could not hear him clearly. "The court will look at the facts," he said. "No income, no car, and a credit score too low for an apartment." I stopped on the bottom step. I had never told him I planned to rent an apartment. I did not even know my current credit score. My father drove us to the Dutchess Family Safety Center. Renee Alvarez met me in a small office while Owen colored at a table nearby. She did not ask why I had waited so long to leave. She asked what made me believe that morning was my last safe chance. I told her about the Word document. Renee helped me disable location sharing, change passwords, create a new cloud account, turn on 2-factor authentication, and freeze my credit. Then I opened my credit report. My score had fallen from 741 to 612. Below it was a loan from North Star Personal Credit for $38,500 at 17.9% interest. The account was in my name. I had never applied for it. Evan had not only taken my car keys, he had been using my name to build a financial life I did not know existed. Chapter 2. The Life They Called Helping. Before Evan, I had never thought of independence as something fragile. I had lived alone, paid my own bills, built an emergency fund, and worked at Hudson Ridge Public Library since 2014. I bought my 2018 Honda CR-V with my own savings and spent weeks comparing insurance rates before signing the papers. I knew what was in my checking account. I knew when rent was due. I knew how to fix a clogged sink and how to ask for help without feeling ashamed. When I met Evan Ward in 2016, he said those were the things he admired most about me. He was calm, polished, and already moving up at Hudson Valley Building Supply. He remembered birthdays arrived on time and never raised his voice in public. He told people I was the most capable woman he had ever met. We married in September of 2018 and bought a 3-bedroom house in Rhinebeck in July of 2020. Diane lived 12 minutes away. She had spent years managing the front office of a private medical practice and seemed to know how every system worked. Insurance referrals, appointment schedules, forms, authorizations. At first, that knowledge felt useful. When I became pregnant in 2022, my blood pressure rose slightly, and I was exhausted all the time. Evan suggested I leave the library. Just for now, he said. I make enough. Mom can help. When Owen is older, you can go back. At the time, Evan was earning around $112,000 a year. The plan sounded temporary, sensible even. I resigned in March of 2022. Helen Foster, the library director, hugged me on my last day and told me the door would always be open if I wanted to apply again. I believed her. I also believed Evan when he said I would only be home for a year or two. The first change was Diane's key. Evan called it an emergency key, but Diane began using it whenever she wanted. She entered without knocking, opened our mail, moved things in the kitchen, and reorganized our bedroom closet while I was at a prenatal appointment. When I objected, she smiled. I am only trying to make things easier for you. She came to appointments and answered questions before I could. She collected Owen's insurance papers, birth certificate, and later his passport, because she said important documents should be kept by someone organized. Whenever I resisted, she looked hurt. I thought you wanted help. That sentence worked because I did need help. Owen was born in August of 2022. For months, I slept in fragments. Evan began handling the bills because he said numbers were one less thing I should have to think about. Then my debit card stopped working. I was standing at a grocery store register with diapers, formula, and 2 cans of soup when the cashier told me the payment had been declined. There were people waiting behind me. Owen was crying in the cart. I called Evan from the parking lot. You went over budget, he said. What budget? The household budget. We discussed this. We had not. He transferred enough money for the diapers and formula, but told me to leave the soup. That evening, he said the embarrassment at the store proved I was not paying attention. After that, I had to photograph every receipt. If I was gone longer than expected, Evan asked which roads I had taken and why I had stopped. Diane began bringing supplies in exact quantities. 6 diapers a day, she once said, while placing a package on the kitchen table. This should last until Thursday. It is easier when we keep things controlled. She never handed me cash. Eventually, I stopped asking what was in the accounts. Every question became a discussion about my judgment, my memory, or my stress level. Tessa Monroe tried to stay close. She had worked with me at Hudson Ridge before becoming a reading specialist at an elementary school. She called after Owen was born, but my phone often showed no missed calls. Once she came to the house while I was upstairs feeding Owen. Diane answered the door. She told Tessa I was asleep and did not want visitors. A few days later, Tessa received a message from my number. I need space. Please stop showing up. I never wrote it. When I told Evan I wanted to call her, he said Tessa had always been negative about marriage. She makes you restless, he said. You are happier when you stop letting people fill your head with problems. After that message, Tessa stopped coming. I told myself she had moved on. The Honda disappeared on February 14, 2025. It had a slow leak in one tire. Evan said he would take it to a garage. A week later, he said the shop was waiting for a part. Then the alignment was damaged. Then the axle needed work. Then the repair was too expensive to rush. Eventually, he stopped pretending the delay was mechanical. "You are not ready to drive yet," he said. Diane agreed. "Why do you need to go anywhere alone?" she asked. "We bring you everything." Once from the passenger seat of Evan's car, I saw a dark blue Honda near Hudson that looked exactly like mine. Same small dent near the rear wheel. Same library sticker on the back window. "That is my car," I said. Evan glanced at it and laughed. "Wrong color." It was not the wrong color. When I insisted, his voice softened. "Linnea, this is what worries me. You become certain about things that are not real." Sitting in Renee's office after finding the North Star loan, I kept thinking about that moment. Renee closed my credit report and asked me a question. "Where did you feel most like yourself before every decision had to go through Evan?" The answer came immediately. The library. I called Helen from Renee's office. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Helen sounded surprised. "Linnea, I have wondered about you for a long time." I apologized for disappearing. She paused. "We invited you to apply for a part-time opening in early 2024. I never saw anything." She checked the archived emails while I waited. "We received a reply from your account," she said. "It said you had decided to focus fully on your family." Then she read part of it. "Linnea needs stability and reduced stimulation." My stomach tightened. That was Evan's language. He had not simply waited for me to remain unemployed, he had answered for me. Helen contacted Tessa that afternoon. Tessa arrived at the safety center carrying a folder. Inside were screenshots, dates, and saved voicemail messages. She showed me the text asking her to stay away. She played a voicemail from Evan saying I was overstimulated and that visits were making my condition worse. Then she showed me a message he had sent directly to her. "We are documenting everything in case she tries to leave with Owen." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Tessa reached across the table. "I knew something was wrong," she said. "I just thought if I kept pushing, he would make things harder for you." I had spent years believing our friendship had faded because I had become too difficult to love. It had not faded. It had been cut. Renee introduced me to Mara Klein, a family law attorney who worked with domestic violence cases. On June 18th and 19th, Mara helped me file for a temporary order of protection and temporary primary physical custody. She based the request on specific conduct: electronic monitoring harassment threats involving Owen interference with my documents and intimidation. The return hearing took place on June 24th. It was brief. The judge maintained the temporary order required communication through a controlled channel and allowed Evan's supervised visits while the court scheduled a fuller evidentiary hearing. Nothing was resolved, but for the first time, Evan could not contact me whenever he wanted. That evening, Mara asked whether Evan or Diane had ever claimed I was in regular therapy. I told her about the single postpartum counseling appointment I attended in 2022. When I returned to my father's house, an email from Empire Health Plan had been forwarded from my old account. It thanked me for completing my 8th telehealth mental health session in 8 months. I read the provider's name twice. I had never met that person. If 8 therapy sessions existed under my name without me, Evan was no longer only telling people a false story about my mental health. He was turning that story into an official record. Chapter 3. The paper trail under my name. Once I understood that fear became something I could organize, Renee gave me a yellow legal pad and told me to begin with March of 2022, the month I left the library. I wrote down every event I could remember: the first declined card, the day Diane took Owen's passport, the afternoon Evan changed the password to our banking app, the morning my Honda disappeared, the words he used when he wanted me to doubt myself. I did not post anything online. I did not call relatives to defend myself. I stopped replying to Diane entirely. Every message about Owen went through the court-approved parenting application or through Mara. I froze my credit with all 3 bureaus. I filed an identity theft report. I contacted North Star Personal Credit and disputed the $38,500 loan. I requested statements from my bank, the title history for my Honda, and every available record from Empire Health Plan. The process made me feel less helpless, but it did not make me feel safe. Every time I clicked submit, I expected Evan to appear behind me and ask what I thought I was doing. My first apartment application was denied within 48 hours. The leasing office sent a short email explaining that my credit score, recent debt, and employment history did not meet their standards. They listed the North Star loan and a credit card balance I did not recognize. For several minutes, I sat at my father's kitchen table staring at the screen. Diane's voice returned immediately. "You do not have enough credit to rent a place." The worst part was that she had been right about the result. For one weak moment, I pictured going back to Rhinebeck. Owen would have his room. I would have a bed. Evan would probably act patient for a few days. Diane would bring groceries and pretend none of it had happened. Renee found me still sitting at the table when she came by that afternoon. "I was denied," I said. She pulled out the chair across from me. "That does not mean Evan was right about you. It means I cannot give Owen a home. It means someone damaged your credit and a landlord relied on the damage. Those are not the same thing." She helped me build a new rental packet with the identity theft report confirmation from North Star that the account was under review, the temporary court order references, and a letter from Helen. Helen could only offer me 18 hours a week at Hudson Ridge Public Library, but I accepted before she finished explaining the schedule. My first shift felt like walking into a version of my life that had continued without me. The circulation desk had been replaced. The software looked different. 2 employees I did not know greeted me by name because Helen had told them I was returning. Within the first hour, I forgot how to process an interlibrary transfer and apologized 3 times. Helen placed one hand on the counter. "I do not need you to prove 8 years of experience before lunch." I laughed nervously. I used to know all of this. "You still do. Your hands just have not remembered yet." Tessa watched Owen that morning and helped me find a childcare program with openings 3 days a week. When I finished my shift, Helen handed me the following week's schedule. My name was printed across 4 blocks of time. It should not have felt like proof, but it did. Evan had spent years telling me I could not function without him. Yet I had shown up, learned what had changed, and completed the shift. As I walked toward the staff entrance, a delivery driver appeared, carrying a vase of white roses. The card was addressed to me. "Owen needs stability. Come home before strangers make this worse." I felt the familiar pull to respond, to explain that Renee and Mara were not strangers, to tell him he was the one who had made it worse. Instead, I photographed the card and sent it to Mara. She replied a few minutes later. "Do not engage. Keep the original." That became the pattern. Evan sent emotion, I created a record. Mara introduced me to Jonah Price, a 52-year-old certified fraud examiner and forensic accountant. His office was small and almost aggressively organized. He did not ask how I had failed to notice what Evan was doing. He asked which accounts had originally belonged to me. Jonah began with records I had the legal right to access. Within a week, he found 3 transfers totaling $6,800 from my savings account to Diane. Each transaction was labeled child care reimbursement. "There was no child care agreement," I said. "Did she submit invoices?" "No." "Did you authorize these payments?" "No." Jonah placed a yellow marker beside each transfer. Then we document that clearly and move to the next account. The next account was harder. My grandmother had left me a trust in 2016. The last balance I remembered seeing was a little over $52,000. Jonah turned his laptop toward me. The balance had been $52,600 before October 8, 2024. On that date, someone submitted an electronic request to withdraw $51,900 for emergency home repairs. I had never made that request. 2 days later, $49,500 moved into Ward Capital Ventures LLC, Evan's company. I pressed both palms against my knees. What is Ward Capital Ventures? Jonah studied my face. You did not know it existed? I shook my head. The company held interests in 2 short-term rental properties. Both had serious cash flow problems. Renovation costs had climbed, occupancy had dropped, and high-interest debt was consuming the income. Jonah estimated the company was short by nearly $94,000. Evan had used my money to pay contractors, keep loans current, and hide the fact that his investment business was failing. He had not only wanted control for the sake of power, he needed me quiet, because quiet people did not examine statements. Detective Lauren Kim from the Dutchess County Financial Crimes Unit took over the official investigation. My father signed a formal statement confirming that he would not participate because of our relationship. Lauren contacted the DMV and Hudson Auto Exchange. The Honda had never been waiting for a part. Its title had been transferred on February 14, 2025. The same day, Evan claimed he was taking it in for a tire repair. The dealership paid $21,400. Caleb Ross, the manager, provided the sales documents and security footage under a lawful request. Lauren showed me a still image from the video. Evan stood near the sales desk. Diane was beside him, holding a folder. According to Caleb's statement, Diane had explained that I was recovering from a mental health crisis and could not appear in person. She provided a copy of my identification and a power of attorney carrying a signature that looked like mine from a distance. The payment went directly to Ward Capital Ventures. I stared at Diane's face in the image. She looked calm, helpful, efficient. Exactly the way she had looked while taking documents from my bedroom. Nora Patel, a fraud specialist at Hudson Valley Community Bank, found another pattern. Diane's phone number had been added to my account profile shortly before the trust withdrawal. The same number had been used to verify the North Star loan. The credit card had been opened with an email address built from a variation of my name. The login records pointed to an internet connection near Diane's house. None of those details proved every charge by themselves, but together, they formed something much harder to explain as a misunderstanding. Jonah summarized what we could document at that stage. The Honda was worth $21,400. The transfers to Diane totaled $6,800. The trust withdrawal was $51,900. The fraudulent credit card balance was $9,640. The confirmed damage came to $89,740. The North Star loan remained separate because it was being disputed as identity theft. I did not pay any of it. For the first time in years, I refused to clean up a problem Evan had created simply because leaving it unresolved made me uncomfortable. By September, I had learned to expect every new document to contain another betrayal. I was still not prepared when Mara called and asked me to come to her office immediately. She had received an updated discovery index from Evan's legal team. Most of the file names were ordinary: tax returns, bank statements, parenting records. One title had been created on June 12, 2025, 5 days before I left. Mara turned the screen toward me. Emergency Temporary Custody Petition Draft. She did not open it yet. Instead, she looked directly at me. What did Evan say would happen if you ever left with Owen? I remembered every warning, every comment about my lack of income, every reminder that the house, the car, and the stable life belonged to him. The missing money had never been the final plan. Evan had been preparing for the day I ran before I even knew I was going to run. Chapter 4. The Case He Built from the Life He Destroyed. Mara opened the draft and turned the laptop toward me. The document was 14 pages long. It described me as unemployed, financially dependent, socially isolated, emotionally volatile, and unable to provide stable transportation or housing for Owen. It referenced my credit score, the North Star loan, the Honda, the telehealth appointments, and the morning I walked along Route 9. The petition made every part of my life sound like evidence against me. Then Mara opened the attachment Diane had created. It was labeled, Incident log. The first entry described the night I cried because Owen had been awake for 6 hours with an ear infection. The second said I had failed to maintain a sanitary kitchen because I left dishes in the sink overnight. Another entry documented that I forgot a dental appointment. One said I became agitated when Evan restricted access to a debit card. Another recorded that I had expressed a desire to leave the marital home. The final entry described Route 9. Diane had written that I placed Owen in danger during an unstable episode and fled without a rational plan. I read the page twice. The pattern was suddenly impossible to ignore. Evan had removed my job, my car, my money, and my friends. Then he had written a legal argument, claiming those losses proved I was incapable of caring for my son. Mara closed the file. He did not simply prepare for a custody dispute, she said. He created the conditions he intended to use. I pressed my fingers into the edge of the table. The room felt too quiet. For years I had treated each problem separately. The card, the car, Tessa, the emails, the credit score. I had believed I was failing in a dozen unrelated ways. The draft showed they were not unrelated. They were a structure. The medical records gave that structure an official surface. Dr. Elise Morgan reviewed my actual chart and provided a written statement. I had never been declared unable to drive. I had never been found incapable of caring for Owen. I had no prescription for the medication Evan claimed I had forgotten. The single postpartum counseling appointment I attended in 2022 documented exhaustion and anxiety common after childbirth. It did not describe psychosis, incapacity, or a need for long-term psychiatric supervision. Empire Health Plans still listed 8 telehealth sessions between September of 2024 and April of 2025. The investigation could not yet prove every claim was fraudulent, but at least 5 sessions had no record of me logging in. Diane had called the provider more than once and described herself as the person helping me manage appointments. Some of the notes included phrases Evan used regularly, including reduced stimulation and impaired judgment under stress. Mara was careful with the evidence. "We do not claim what we cannot prove," she told me. "We show that the insurance records do not establish what Evan says they establish." While we prepared for the evidentiary hearing, Evan worked on something else. He worked on the audience. He sent messages to relatives, neighbors, and members of our church group. He said my father had taken advantage of a mental health crisis. He said I had refused treatment. He said he was trying to protect Owen, while everyone around me encouraged reckless decisions. Paige Holloway sent me a message one evening. "Owen needs both parents. Please do not destroy your family over a difficult season." I stared at the words for a long time. Then I sent a screenshot to Mara and did not respond. My father began receiving calls too. Some people accused him of using his position to intimidate Evan. He refused to answer publicly. He did not post a statement or call in favors. Tessa wanted to defend me. "I can tell them what he did," she said. "Not online," I told her. "Keep everything." For the first time, silence did not mean surrender. It meant preservation. Evan tried a different approach during one of his supervised visits with Owen. The visit took place in a family services room with a monitor seated across the space. When Owen became distracted by a box of wooden trains, Evan leaned toward me. "If you withdraw this and come home, I can fix everything," he said quietly. I looked at him. What does fixing everything mean? "I can restore the cards. We can replace the car. I can explain to everyone that this was a misunderstanding." He lowered his voice further. "You can go back to the library, if that is what you really want." The offer made my skin cold. Permission to work. Permission to drive. Permission to have access to money that already belonged to me. I asked the question before I could talk myself out of it. "If you believe I am unstable, why do you want me to come home and care for Owen alone?" Evan's expression changed for less than a second. "You are twisting my words." I had heard that sentence hundreds of times. This time, I did not explain. I do not need you to confirm what I lived through anymore. The monitor announced that the visit had ended. I picked up Owen's coat, thanked her, and walked out without looking back. The evidentiary hearing was scheduled for early October at Dutchess County Family Court in Poughkeepsie. Mara organized the case into 4 groups: my real medical records and the inconsistencies in the telehealth claims. Evidence that Evan blocked employment isolated me from Tessa and monitored my phone. The credit report, the loan, the sale of the Honda, and the missing money. The custody draft and Diane's incident log, both prepared before I left. Renee practiced testimony with me. Answer only the question asked, she said. What if they misunderstand me? Then Mara will clarify. What if I cry? Crying is not an admission. She taught me to say, I do not know, when I did not know. To separate memory from assumption. To stop apologizing before every answer. The morning of the hearing, my hands shook so badly that I spilled coffee on the cuff of my blouse. In court, Evan's attorney began with Route 9. He emphasized the traffic, the heat, and Owen's age. He described me as unemployed at the time, without independent housing, dependent on my father and friends, and recently returned to part-time work. He referred to the Empire Health Plan records as evidence of ongoing treatment. Mara did not pretend my life had been stable. She explained why it had become unstable. I had no car because it had been sold using a questionable power of attorney. I had no savings because funds had been transferred without my authorization. I had no job because Evan had answered a work opportunity in my name. My credit had collapsed under accounts I was disputing as identity theft. The telehealth claims did not prove I attended the sessions. I walked because I had no working card, no keys, and believed my phone was being monitored. Then Mara placed the custody draft beside the financial timeline. She looked at Evan. Why do the facts you describe as proof that Mrs. Ward was incapable also appear to be conditions you helped create? Evan said he had taken over because I was overwhelmed. Mara asked why the draft petition had been created 5 days before I left. He said he was only preparing for the possibility that I might act irrationally. Before she acted. Mara said, yes. So you expected her to leave. I was concerned. Concerned enough to prepare a custody filing, but not concerned enough to restore access to her vehicle, money, or medical records. Evan shifted in his chair. His answers became longer and less precise. Diane maintained that she had only tried to help. She said she believed I had authorized Evan to handle financial matters. Mara did not ask Diane to confess. She used the records. There was no written authorization. I had never appeared at Hudson Auto Exchange. Diane's phone number had been used to verify multiple accounts. She had created the incident log while also controlling access to my documents and helping manage the transactions now under investigation. Diane's voice remained gentle. That made the contradictions sound worse. When I testified, Evan's attorney asked why I had not left sooner. My hands tightened in my lap. I answered with the sequence I had practiced. First, leaving work was temporary. Then one card stopped working. Then a friend disappeared. Then my car did not come back. By the time I understood the pattern, there was already a file describing my reaction to it. He asked whether walking on Route 9 had been safe. No. Then you admit your judgment was impaired. I admit the road was dangerous. At the time, I believed staying would give Evan more time to finish a case designed to take Owen from me. My voice shook, but I did not take the answer back. At the end of the hearing, the judge maintained temporary primary physical custody with me. Evan's visits remained supervised. Electronic tracking and direct contact outside the approved channel were prohibited. Records and disputed assets had to be preserved while the financial investigation continued. No one was arrested in the courtroom. No one shouted. The power changed hands through documents, dates, and a decision read in an even voice. Outside, Paige was waiting near the courthouse steps. She looked older than she had in June. I need to give you something, she said. Before I left, Evan had sent messages to people at church and several neighbors. He told them that if I began making accusations, they should remember I had a history of instability. Paige had saved them. "I thought he was asking us to support him," she said. "Now I think he was preparing us to repeat his story." She agreed to send everything to Mara. Evan had not only built a legal file, he had tried to build a room full of witnesses before there was even a dispute. Now those same people were beginning to understand what they had been used for. I left the courthouse holding Owen's hand. The financial investigation was not finished. The divorce was not final. Evan still had lawyers' money and a voice in what came next. But that night, no one could force me to return my son to the man who had built an entire version of my life without my consent. Chapter 5. The life no one else had a key to. The court order gave me safety, but it did not give me closure. From October through December, Detective Lauren Kim and the Dutchess County Financial Crimes Unit continued working through subpoenas, account records, and digital logs. The results came slowly, one document at a time. The signature on the power of attorney used to sell my Honda was not mine. Diane had been at Hudson Auto Exchange with Evan. Her phone number had been used to verify the North Star loan. The trust withdrawal had not been authorized by me. Money from both the Honda and the trust had moved into Ward Capital Ventures. Several telehealth claims were referred for a separate review involving billing and identity verification. No one was convicted overnight. There was no dramatic arrest outside the courthouse. The investigation moved the way real investigations often move, through requests, delays, sworn statements, and records that became harder to explain each time they were placed beside one another. A civil order restricted the transfer of certain Ward Capital Ventures assets while the financial claims were pending. Evan's employer began its own review, but not because of gossip about our marriage. Hudson Valley Building Supply discovered that Evan had used company email for transactions involving his private rental business. Some meals and travel related to the rentals had been submitted as client expenses. He had also used relationships with company suppliers to obtain discounted materials for his own properties without disclosing the conflict. He was placed on administrative leave and later removed from his regional director position. He sold his interest in one of the short-term rentals to cover legal fees and part of the civil obligations. Evan did not lose everything in a single day. What he lost first was the ability to control the explanation. He could no longer tell his employer, the court, or our community that every problem existed only because I was unstable. Dates, account records, and company policies did not respond to his calm voice. Diane's moment came in Mara's office. She arrived carrying a document box and a large envelope. Inside were the remaining family papers, Owen's belongings, the old house key, and a copy of the Honda key that no longer opened anything I owned. For years, Diane had entered my home whenever she pleased. She had called it helping. She had moved through my bedroom, my mail, and my records, as though access were proof of authority. Now, she had to place every key on Mara's conference table. "I would like to speak to Linnea privately," she said. Mara remained beside me. "That is not part of today's arrangement." Diane looked at me. "We are still family." I checked the inventory list and matched each item to the contents of the box. Family had once been the word they used when they wanted me to surrender a boundary. I signed the receipt. "Everything involving Owen will continue through the approved process." Diane's expression tightened. I did not argue with her. I did not tell her what she had cost me. I left with the envelope in my hand. That silence felt different from the silence I had lived in before. This time it belonged to me. By then, Owen and I were living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Hyde Park. I had been approved in August after the first landlord rejected me. The rent was $1,780 a month. The carpet was worn near the hallway, the radiator knocked whenever the heat turned on, and the kitchen was barely large enough for 2 people to stand in at once. When I signed the lease, I read every page twice. I checked the tenant line again and again. Only my name appeared, no Evan, no Diane. The apartment was close to Hudson Ridge Public Library. Owen's childcare program, and my father's house. It did not have the fenced yard or wide front porch of the Rhinebeck home. It had something that house never had: a door I controlled. Helen increased my schedule from 18 hours a week to 30 after several months. I returned to children's programs, reader services, and scheduling. Tessa and I began running a small reading support program together for children who needed extra help. Helen provided an affidavit confirming my attendance reliability and ability to manage responsibilities. She also documented the email Evan had sent declining the earlier job opportunity in my name. The work did more than provide income. Every completed shift contradicted the person Evan had described in his custody draft. Tessa did not become responsible for rebuilding my entire life. She helped when she could. She picked up Owen on hearing days. We drank coffee after work. Sometimes we talked about the past. Sometimes we discussed books, childcare, or nothing important at all. I learned that accepting help did not require giving someone control. Safety did not erase the habits Evan had trained into me. I still jumped when my phone vibrated. I checked the lock several times before bed. At the grocery store, I sometimes removed an item from the cart because I could hear Evan calling it unnecessary. I apologized to Helen when I had done nothing wrong. Renee told me leaving the house had changed my circumstances, but my nervous system still expected the old rules. Healing is not a straight line, she said. Some days I believed her. Other days, I stood in the apartment holding a receipt, fighting the urge to photograph it for someone who no longer had the right to ask. In February of 2026, the civil property case reached a settlement. The documented losses totaled $89,740. That included $21,400 for the Honda, $6,800 from my savings, $51,900 from the trust, and the $9,640 fraudulent credit card balance. The North Star loan remained separate under the identity theft process. The settlement required repayment of my separate property, under a structured schedule, divided the equity in the Rhinebeck house, established child support, covered part of my legal fees, and placed protections around future accounts. It was not criminal restitution. The financial investigation remained separate. The divorce became final in April. Owen lived primarily with me. Evan received conditional parenting time based on compliance with the court order and Owen's best interests. Diane could not have unsupervised contact without clear permission and conditions. No one signed away parental rights in a dramatic exchange. The court created boundaries where Evan had spent years erasing them. In March, I bought a used 2017 Subaru Impreza. I used my wages, the first settlement payment, and a legitimate loan in my own name. There was no co-owner. When the salesperson placed the key in my palm, I remembered the Honda the Heat on Route 9 and Owen's weight against my chest. I did not buy the most impressive car on the lot. I bought the one I could afford, and the one no one else could sell without me. A few weeks later, I stood in a grocery store with milk, bread, and a container of chocolate-covered almonds in my cart. Evan had always called them wasteful. My card was approved. No message appeared asking what I had bought. At home, I left a cup in the sink overnight. No one photographed it. Owen spilled cereal across the kitchen floor the next morning. I cleaned it while he laughed, and there was no disappointed sigh behind me. After 11 months of disputes, several fraudulent accounts were removed or corrected. My credit score rose to 684. It was not perfect. For the first time, it reflected my decisions instead of someone else's deception. One evening in May, I locked the doors of Hudson Ridge Public Library after my shift. 3 keys rested in my hand: the key to my apartment, the key to my Subaru, the key to the library. I drove home and placed them on the kitchen table beside a phone with no tracking application. Owen was asleep in the next room. The apartment was small. Counseling was ongoing. Paperwork still arrived. Some nights, I still checked the lock twice, but no one had a copy of those keys unless I had chosen to give it to them. Evan once made me believe freedom was something I was too unstable to hold. Looking at those 3 keys, I finally understood the truth. I had never been too weak to live my own life. I had only spent too long in a house where every door was opened and closed by someone else. When do you think care begins to turn into control? Did I become free on the day I left, or on the day I finally trusted myself again? Share your thoughts below, and stay with the channel for more stories about women who remained quiet until the truth became impossible to ignore.